in here. I know that you attended those meetings as well. At this point, I rely very heavily on Charles, our chair, to get me through all the terminology that you guys use, from ESD to CZ, SS, and whatever else there's. We had quite a few discussions about all the abbreviations that float around in your world that are a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I'm trying to bring in kind of a forestry perspective here, and just questioning what the committee has been doing. Had good discussions with Charles about that, and just trying to build on top of each other, and just bring a different perspective to what you guys are doing.
Thank you, Patrick. I don't know if anybody wants to start the meeting, if there's anything that you guys have already started talking about that you want to discuss while Charles is coming on board. But I'm also going to monitor the chat box. So if you'd like to ask a question via chat, just go ahead and type it in there, and I can ask Patrick, and when Charles comes on, Charles as well, to address it.
Well, let me cut in here then. During our pre-conference meetings, we did have discussions on about 15 different topics. Now I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, I'm not going to share my screen here.
Hang on, you can share your screen. Let me give
All
you rights. Hold on. There you go.
Hey, Dara.
Yes.
It won't let him connect. It's so weird. It's like defended by a firewall or proxy.
Can he connect by phone? By calling the phone number?
All right, let me ask him. I'm gonna mute myself.
Okay. Go ahead, Patrick.
All right. I'm gonna have this document up. These are the pre-conference discussion points that we had, and the ones that participated. You know that in our last meeting, we started ranking the topics based on what we feel is really of high importance and should be pursued further at this conference. And of all this, this is one of the early versions. Charles actually has the latest of all the materials, unfortunately, that we worked up. But at the end, we came down with 3 proposal items, one of which was the inclusion of forestry sites and timber management states in ESDs. The second one was something about alternative stable states of ESDs, with some recommendations in here, and then also part 632 of the National Ecological Site to include the coastal zone CCSS. I have no idea what it stands for, but kind of include that in the development. There was something about also reclaimed sites, reclaimed mine lands, and including that. And I think Charles was looking into some more information about what's happening with that part 632 of the National Ecological Site Handbook. So that's kind of where we stand right now. These were like the 3 topics with the recommendations that you see on the screen that by the group was decided those are like the highest priority ones. If anybody wants to add something to this or already has added something and given more information to Charles that I'm not aware of, please let me know. If you want to refine recommendations or have questions about this, or feel that some other items need to be addressed that are not listed here in these 3 proposal items, we can certainly discuss that.
Patrick, you probably also want to ask someone to take notes, to take meeting minutes, unless you're going to do it, but that might help as well.
Yeah, I can take some minutes here. I was planning on doing that with Charles leading this whole group. But that's okay.
Hi, Patrick.
Hey, Matt.
I'm Matt Levi. I'm an assistant professor at University of Georgia in soil science. I'm just curious to know, kind of before you're trying to kick off some discussion here. Are these proposals that would actually be used to for guidance in terms of research funding items in the future, or are they sort of recommendations for guidance of NCSS? Can you maybe clarify a little bit about how these proposals might be, carried forward, and how that also relates to your list that you showed previously?
That is a very good question. And honestly, I'm not sure we have talked about that at all, whether this goes into research funding. It was more like by the group that these are some items all above, without going specifically into research or anything else, that have some importance right now. Like I said, this is what we got from the group when we had the pre-meetings. I'm not sure research actually came up that, what would guide research funding in the future. It's more like what needs to be done to make everybody's life, I don't know, easier, move forward. I'm sure Charles has a better answer for this, as he has a little more insight in what's happening. That's about all I can give you right now until he shows up. But if you want to add something to it, it's certainly like, this is not the end all be all, right? This is what we came up with. That's our first shot at, this is what our proposals could look like, what we can be doing, but we can certainly move forward, other things forward as well, if the group decides that that's what we want to do.
Sure. Thank you. I know the research priorities meeting happens next, and there's some, topic areas that have been discussed for that group that I was just trying to clarify a little bit with respect to how discussion would go for this particular committee.
Absolutely. And I think I remember there may have been some internal questions for us, for Charles to reach out to a different committee to get some feedback on where the overlaps are. Because I know that with these 15 parts that we had here, there was quite some overlap with some other committees where we're like, well, we're invading in somebody else's space, and we heard from the group that somebody else is working on something similar already. So and somehow I got out of the loop on that. And I have not attended any of your previous meetings, so I have actually no clue how this meeting typically works, how this works out, what this committee is doing, what happens at this stage. And like, I've seen the pre-conference meetings, but this particular stage is where I'm always like, I'm sitting in the back seat and I'm just taking the notes.
Well,
Okay, so I think Charles is online, but he seems to be muted. Charles, I'm going to try to, it says ask to unmute. Okay, let me see if that helps you unmute. Okay, you're
Okay,
unmuted.
I'm on now, I think.
Welcome.
We love having technical difficulties, don't we?
Hey, you did it.
Okay, so can't share anything, so I'm going to do this from the phone. It sounds like you're going good, Patrick, so I'm going to step out your way.
Yeah, don't step out of my way. There was a question from Matt just here. I don't know if you heard that, about how our proposals flow into some of the research funding, if they have any impact on future research funding and things like that.
Good question. I don't know.
All right, I would say then we just leave this up. And Matt, you said there is
Yep.
a research committee talking about this next, right?
right. And I see Dee has her hand up.
Yeah.
Maybe she has some more insight for us as well.
Absolutely, I just saw that. So
Matt, with Matt, I can't see any of the screen, so
yeah, we got Dee here, and we're just gonna let Dee talk real quick and see what she has to tell us.
Hi, everybody. I do have some previous experience with the crossover. of committee work. And what we've done in the past is try to collaborate with those other committees. For instance, with the interpretations committee, that bleeds over into taxonomy and standards and ecosystem dynamics and all of that. And there was a time when we would have meetings of those committee chairs together to try to prioritize those charges that have overlap so that perhaps they could be a little bit more powerful and actually get addressed, maybe, since if there are multiple committees that whatever the charge is would affect. So that would be just an idea. We've tried it in the past. I can't speak as to how successful that effort has been, but it has been tried before. Just to communicate with those other committees and see if they have some similar types of charges on their end that you could mesh committee charges together to make them more powerful. That's all.
All right, thank you, Dee. All right.
Does this usually all kind of come together at the business meeting after you guys report out and with the other sections and the research priorities, or the other committees, excuse me, and research priorities?
Well, this is Dee again. That's a good question, Dara. Like I said, we've tried. I've chaired the interpretations committee before, and so that's where I got the idea, because we had a lot of interpretations that were related to ecosystem dynamics and whatever else. And so we did that experiment to try to partner up with the other committees. And in the end, I don't know how successful the effort was. I can't remember what those charges were or how they were presented, but we did at the business meeting present those as being, this is a charge that crosses XYZ committees, to try to emphasize the needs there on the parts of the committees. I thought
Dee, this is, oh, sorry,
this
is
is
Belinda.
Belinda,
Yeah.
you were one of the chairs too that year.
Yeah. And gosh, that's been a little bit of time ago.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
It's been a minute, but when you're saying that, I'm like, I remember that. And then I know that you and I, and maybe Jen, and maybe I can't remember,
Tiffany.
we met multiple times, I think, at least after that. So I guess the answer to the question would be, however, you can make it work. There's no rule in place for that kind of collaboration. You can just, if you see an opportunity, you can discuss it at the business meeting, put it out there, but then, you can follow up in your own, in your own time. And I believe that's what we did. I don't remember what we ended up with as a result, but I remember that we did approach it.
This is Dara again. We have Thursday relatively open. Would you all think it's a good idea that I try to poll the chairs of the committees to come together and discuss some research priorities? Even though I know research priority is a committee, I'm not trying to overstep them, but I'm just saying so they have your information as well.
Hey, Dara, this is Belinda again. Sorry. And I don't know how it's been done at other conferences, but the last one I attended, which has been at least 4 years ago, during the report, the business meeting, every committee would give a short, I don't know, not much longer than 10 minutes, just report of sort of the results of the committee meeting, and that could include any ideas for research. So I think it could be done that way.
Okay, so and that's how we were going to do this time too. So if that's If you think that's good enough to convey what you want to the Research Priorities Committee, that's fine. That'll work. Thank you.
Okay, Matt, I see you have your hand up.
Sure, thank you. So I just wanted to, I guess, clarify how the proposals that you showed on your shared screen a few minutes ago are going to be pushed up to leadership. And I guess to kind of streamline, maybe for those of us here interested in discussing these topics, how we should view those proposals and those ideas. That's kind of where my question started, you know, like what is our objective with the proposals? Are they just going to be, you know, recommendations for focus areas internally within NRCS and NCSS partners? Or are these things that actually need to be, you know, brought forward to say in the Research Priorities Committee as a topic area in terms of funding projects?
Okay, I getcha. The way I've seen and the way I've taken this is that this was something that is NCSS internal, has nothing to do with research priorities. The only thing that where I see that maybe research has something to do is with that last part of the National Ecological Site Handbook and those coastal, hold on a second, yeah, here, the coastal zone soil survey and maybe the reclaimed mine sites, that there may be something for developing those, what do you call it, states or descriptions. But other than that, from what I take away, all the three topics that I have here, and if I share my screen real quick again, they all look just like internal information, internal issues. Like we didn't go at all into what research should be done to achieve this. It's more like kind of a housekeeping, things that had high priority. I may be wrong with that. If anybody out there thinks differently, please correct me. And Charles, you may know more about this.
I think we all flying by the seat of our pants too. So,
very good.
Yeah, that's kind of my understanding, is that the recommendations come from this committee. We present them in the full business meeting. And then those recommendations are utilized to push things forward within cooperative soil survey. So.
Right, and we also made an effort early on in our meetings that we are the, the Soil and Ecosystems Dynamics Committee, and we tried not to overlap with anybody else's committees and then selected our topics so that whatever we thought belongs to somebody else, that we don't even get into that.
Right. And these are just the top 3 priorities from our 2 previous meetings. So if there's other topics, but these were the ones that were discussed at length with the group.
Right, and our goal for today was to refine those recommendations if we have to, and add something to it if something else needs to be moved forward at the proposal and recommendation stage for the business meeting later.
Correct. And then there's another topic we need to have is on the next page of the recommendations was the co-chairs for the next meeting in 2 years, as far as to pass this on to.
Yep, that's right.
So I want that needs to be out there for everybody to think about if they're interested in it. Great.
All right, I saw Manuel, you were unmuting yourself.
Yeah, just wanted to ask, I didn't have the opportunity to participate in other meetings, but I wonder if there was any discussion on, and this is something that kind of surfaced for the Caribbean area, But you know, what will be the role in the future of ecological site descriptions in the incorporation of like a more interactive dynamic climate data that could be used, ecological site descriptions, for potential conservation predictions. Like if you identify community shifting due to more drought, or that, you know, you incorporate climate data to use it as a predictive, let's say, model or something like that. Have you had any discussions? And this is all related with all the different, you know, buzzwords, let's put it that way, climate smart agriculture. But how, do you have those type of discussions? Because I, you know, personally, I think there's an opportunity for ecological site descriptions to help with that, but just wonder if you had that type of discussions.
All right, as far as I can think back, we did not discuss something like this in particular. What we did discuss was using one of the tools that you have, and it may have been added to actually include a lot of data from other sources after some vetting to have a more comprehensive database or source for multiple pieces of information. But we did not talk about climate data or climate smart agriculture and including this. At least I can't remember that part. And Charles, you may want to add something to this.
I keep thinking about the discussion that's going on right now with dynamic soil survey, and one of the concepts of that is that the information would be fed by multiple sources. Climate data, as it evolves over time, could be used to better inform it. So I think all of these things are in play, but we have not had any specific discussions within this committee on how we see it.
Yeah, that's fine. I think at some point in time, I think that incorporation, and that, you know, it goes to dynamic soil survey, how this is gonna incorporate to that. So any work in that direction will help tremendously for those efforts. And Charles, I don't know if you recall, but this goes back to the meetings we had with Dr. Gould and the climate hubs, and they were kind of, they had some kind of some leadership communication and talks that wanted, you know, some type of products. So anyway, just wanted to, sorry that I throw that out in this meeting, because this is kind of to wrap it up, but it's something that that, you know, near future it might be worth incorporating. I don't know if I don't think we're prepared yet, but it is something that could be very powerful if we get to be able to manage this type of information that way.
I agree. I think you're correct that ESDs have a very beneficial way that we can display that information, that, you know, this is what it was historically, but we can't get back there now because of these changes over time. Increase in temperature, decrease in rainfall, increase in rainfall, all of those factors. I think we have a lot of opportunities in the ES concepts, as well as with any data that's collected from the dynamic soil properties studies, any DSP work that's done. All of those things would be integral in providing that information to the clients.
Absolutely, and to help with the identification of potential resource concerns to then align conservation practices. So that's the line.
All right, so from what I'm hearing, it sounds like some of this is already in the works somewhere within NRCS. Am I correct with that? Charles, that's kind of what you mentioned. There's something going on about this.
Yes, within the discussion on dynamic soil surveys, there's multiple layers of information that will be made available through one mechanism.
Okay.
It's kind of the discussion on that. So
this is now not something that we need to address here. I know Matt is here. He turned on the camera. I know you want to say something. I'll give you the room here in a second. But from that standpoint, it seems like it's being addressed somehow already. So it's not something that needs to be pushed right now, unless I hear different from Matt, and then I have Roy afterwards. Well, let Matt go first. We'll come back to this.
Just, I wanted to make a point that if, we mentioned DSPs as a topic area, but I think the 3 priorities that were listed did not include DSPs. Would that be under the purview of this committee as a, dynamic ecosystem property of interest? Is that something that we should include as one of those priority areas? I don't know, just an idea.
All right, I'm just reading through the proposal that I have here. So the only thing we have about DSPs is, I think, something about including guidance for restoration parts, I think, in the Ecological Site Handbook. And that's about the extent of my knowledge of DSPs. So Charles, I need you to jump in here.
In our previous meeting notes, after I did all the sorting by priority, it was number 8 was dynamic soil property projects. And I'm reading back through the notes. And it was about the process. It's including ESDs in the dynamic soils projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If that is a priority, if the group feels like DSP should be higher, or we should include it as one of the other proposals, if there's something specific, then we should entertain that also.
All right, Roy Wick, I see your hand up, and I see you posted some stuff in the chat here as well.
That's what I was going to say, to Manuel's question, and Charles pretty much answered it. Charles can't see. So I put a fact sheet over there, Charles, on the dynamic soil survey, and definitely it mentions ecological sites, and we are looking at adding all the things that would play into resilience for ecosystems, and you're talking about climate change and reduction in rainfall. Really getting rolling on that is, as far as the division goes, that's right at the top of all our priorities, to incorporate all this into tools. It includes ecological sites, dynamic soil properties, and climate data. So that one pager is it's about a year old, but it summarizes our early thoughts on it.
All right, this is great. Thank you, Roy. So I think that answers then the question that I had, whether we need to push this as a recommendation any further or not. And it sounds like it's already in the works with the goal of actually creating those tools that Manuel has recommended or asked about. All right. we're gonna move this thing along then. Again, the goal today is to move our proposals, our recommendations forward. At this point, I just, for the ones that have not had a chance to read this, let's go over our 3 proposals that we want to push forward. See if we're still all in alignment with that and all agree with this. The first one was the inclusion of forestry sites and timber management states in ESDs. And the recommendation that we phrased and that we formed was to revive the Forest Ecological Site Committee to refine these recommendations and develop others as needed, but also to include the US Forest Service leadership in this committee to get their input, their feedback, and then include information in a way that specific tables can be selected in the reference, as well as other states and phases. And then coordinate with the Northeast NCSS Soil and Ecosystem Dynamics Committee to share experiences and approaches. And I believe, was it Nels that was in our calls from the Northeast? I think I've seen you here on this call, Nils. If it was you, would you mind just talking to us a little bit about what it was that we wanted to do with you guys up there? Like, you had some experience with that, I believe. I may be wrong.
Patrick, the only change I had on that one was it's Forest Ecological Site Team, not committee.
All right, works.
FEST. You know we like them. You know we like them acronyms. FEST.
Fest. Yeah, that sounds like a party to me in German. All right, that's all good. We have that. Does anybody have anything against this, that we move this one forward? Anybody feel that forestry sites, timber management states, and ESDs is not important and we shouldn't be pushing it? Again, from our previous meetings, this came out as the #1, as one of the highest topics that we need to or should recommend to push forward. All right, I got one positive in the chat from Matt. Thank you.
I think it's a good idea.
All right, thanks, Christine. And if anybody has any changes to wording, I'm happy to hear those too, or if you want to send them to us after the meeting or put them in the chat, that's all good. I'm not sure. We're gonna see what we can refine here before we submit the final document, and I don't know if you can send this out to the group at one point or another, or have it in a business meeting. Well, we'll see, but let me just stop real quick so I can see if anybody else wants to say something here. Oh. All right, not hearing any other comments, I assume that this is fine. Point #1, we can move forward with that, which brings us then to our second proposal, alternative stable states of ESDs, with the recommendation to continue to engage in this development. Include urban states within regular ESDs, develop an urban ecological site description for highly altered soils, mine spoils, landfills, and so on, and then coordinate with the urban soils focus team, there's the team again, to develop consensus and detailed recommendations. Anything we can add to that? Anything else that is needed, required? Anybody wants to see on this?
I like this. I'm on the urban soils focus team.
Okay.
So usually me and Randy end up working on a lot of different things. So this is something that I think is a good idea, just because it's with urban soil survey. I think it's important to have these states for urban areas too.
All right, thank you. Okay, and I just see a message from Nels here that the Northeast region is interested in coordinating with our Southern region here on the forest ecocide issues work. So that is great. So that brings us then to kind of a Southeastern kind of collaborative here on working on some larger issues. And that's related back to the forestry sites on proposal point number 1. And I see Matt, you have your video on, so I assume you want to say something.
Yeah. Thanks, Patrick. So I think number 2 is a good proposal as well. In particular, I think it has potential to link up with some of the existing miscellaneous areas and soil survey. And that might be kind of a nice thing. I don't know if that's been discussed, but could be a nice way to incorporate, ESDs with our existing structure of soil survey miscellaneous areas.
All right.
I couldn't figure out how to raise my hand, so I'm just gonna talk. That's
All right.
okay.
That works for me, Brian. I see you here. So go ahead.
I guess I want a little point of clarification on what the recommendation is, or if it's appropriate at this time, I guess. Are we talking urban states within an ecological site description, or a completely different site description for urban land use?
I'm going to have to push that one to Charles.
That's a good question, Brian. What's your thoughts?
Well, I can see it going either way, I guess.
Uh-huh.
I'm not a huge proponent of having a standalone urban ecological site description. I am a bigger proponent of having states within ecological site descriptions that include urban states.
Any other thoughts from the group?
I can see the argument either way, I guess.
As a co-chair, I'm going to stand neutral and let anybody else chime in. And I think that's where the discussion, if we were sitting around the room, there would be discussion going on. So,
So is the question having a standalone ecological site versus us like its own state in the state and transition model?
Yes.
Yes.
I think at the very least, it should have a state in the state and transition model.
All right, I'm also having a few comments here that come up in the chat about this too, and then I'm going to get to Jack here in a minute. But Belinda is writing, in previous meetings, this came up, but we never decided, and I believe we decided to make it case by case. And then Matthew Duval is writing something that this issue needs to be resolved by the urban soil survey focus team first. So
me and Randy.
I like that, right? We push it off to somebody else, but
no, it's we definitely, that could be something that we work on moving forward. Because I know it's been brought up for sure.
Maybe that is something that somebody else needs to decide how this fits best within ESDs, whether it's its own or fits within ESD as a state or something like that. My terminology may be off, but you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jack Ferrara.
Yeah, hi. For those who don't know me, I'm the ES specialist down in South Florida. And so like Belinda said, we've been going case by case. Our biggest area is Miami-Dade. And in there you have it's a concrete jungle. The soil is completely gone, nothing representative of the historical ecological sites that were there. So I could see in that making a individual ecological site description for urban development, but then in less developed areas, having it as a state in transition box is kind of very important as well. Just my 2 cents as well.
So that sounds to me then almost that maybe with that recommendation should be another recommendation to actually develop some guidance on when to use state and when to use the actual site description based on what you just talked about, whether it's completely urbanized or it's just has some change characteristics. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there definitely needs to be some guidance developed on that, because if you go by the definition of an ecological site description, it is, and it's alternate states, everything is a departure from reference. So the ecological site has to have a reference state. And if we're going to call urban a reference state, I guess, but it's not completely accurate. So some guidance from whatever group is much needed.
I think part of that recommendation where it says continue to engage in the development is most appropriate, in my opinion, that we need to continue to engage and we need to bring staff together that are working in, bring Jack together, working in Miami-Dade, Nels in the Northeast, and others of us in between, with others in cooperative soil survey, to figure out what's the most appropriate way to handle these things and provide that guidance. But you make a very important point, Brian, that I don't think a concrete slab is a reference state.
Well, and the same logic would apply to other anthropogenic soil features like
correct,
hard rock mines or anything like that, landfills, whatever.
And that some of that may be included in 632 whenever that's fleshed out.
One could hope.
For those reference states for, urban, we'd have to go back to, we'd have to find the historical references for what they used to be, and go back to that, whether it's a prairie or forest or, having access to historical documents, geological references, historical land use, if there's or historical vegetation data is really helpful in developing that. So we'd have to be able to work with hopefully other agencies would have data, or like local governments could help out with that.
Yep, absolutely. You're probably never going to find anything close to reference to sample. So you'll have to rely on history.
When we did the Chicago survey, we didn't do the ESDs for it, but in order to figure out what the soils were, obviously they were either going to be mostly mollisols or alpha sols. We had organizations like the Morton Arboretum that provided us with historical vegetation data. We had historical imagery from the city. We had a bunch of other stuff that it was basically like we were like history detectives. It was really fun. So we use that when we use some of that when developing the provisional ecological site data for MLRAs 110 and 108A. And my question was, what do I do with some of these, the anthropogenic soils? And we were told they weren't going to do anything with them. And so just to leave them out, so they were never included in any of those. And so I didn't really like that answer, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so there was no guidance on it. So I suspect that we could have used some of that data to figure out what they used to be and just kind of threw them in there. It just might take extra time to locate all that historical documents.
Yep, and I think that's completely acceptable, especially if the way that we're talking about the future of ecological site work gets adopted, then it'll just be a work in progress with the best available data that we have at hand.
All right, I made some changes to the recommendation and basically added this last sentence here. If you can see this, the develop guidance on when, if to use alternate state for urban development or change, I'm not sure how to rephrase that correctly, or use of an urban ecological site description. That's just so that we have all this information in here with our recommendation that this is something that we figured that needs some decision making on it and needs to be pushed forward. And I see Jack, you have your hand raised again.
Hi, I also have Martin Figueroa with me, and he wanted to say something.
Okay.
Yeah, we're talking about human transported, human actor soils, especially here on Florida. There's some areas out there that once they get urbanized, they never go back. But they still hold an actor vegetated community, which supports some ecology on it, and it's being managed by the counties and city levels that way. So I'm wondering, why we shouldn't try to explore the possibility of having its own ESD for these particular areas. We have other areas that has been human actor and human transported as well, that has been purchased by conservation programs by the state and county level, that they will remain untouched, but however, they're trying to bring it back to what it was. To those ones, I would say, yeah, maybe we can have a station and transition, but for the areas that aren't, I mean, I would say that it could be good to have it on their own ESD, in my humble opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's examples of other areas that are not anthropogenized, however you say that word, where the abiotic features are completely altered in a way, from a departure from reference that they'll never go back either. And those are captured in a state change with no arrows back. You cannot restore it back to what it used to be. And that's completely okay. So just it's an argument, a discussion, whatever, that needs to be fleshed out either way.
All right, and I do see in the chat that we also have something about urban would maybe not be considered a reference, perhaps using restoration as a project as an example. There's also something from Nelsie about analogous reference sites that have been proposed for anthropic sites, different origin but similar function, that may act as a stand-in. The way I see this is, and now Matt, I see you have your hand raised here. It seems to me that this is certainly something that needs to be moved forward, and I'm not sure it's this committee's focus to actually make the final decision, but to bring forward that there is a lot of questions and a lot of input that is required and needed, and some more thinking, more than we can do in a 2-hour time frame, to make a decision whether it's going to be an ESD or a state or maybe something completely different for the sites. I think we have heard a lot of good information from Florida and all around of what's out there and what happens and what it can be. And Matt, I have you on my list now.
Sure, thank you. So in line with what's just been discussed, I was curious to know, in the East, ESDs as a concept are relatively new. So I looked to the Southwest, where I'm kind of familiar with some areas, and I thought, well, what are the other urban areas doing? What do they have mapped currently, correlated? So downtown Tucson, for example, there are ecological sites listed that would be based on, I guess, the previous soil survey. And so, I think this is definitely something of national importance that would need to be sort of coordinated at that level. And maybe it would, actually be something employed across the board in many of these urban areas. And perhaps because we're trying to figure out what to do in these cases now in the East, it could actually be improved for the national scope.
Excellent. So I just added this to my list here that this is maybe of national importance, that this could be one of the topics that we're going to push all the way up. Okay. This was a great discussion. I think we're all on the same page here of that this is important, that it has a reason to be up here. And that brings us then to the third proposal that we have that we can then discuss, and that is the part 632 of the National Ecological Handbook. And I do remember that there is a whole group working on this, and we are trying to maybe provide a recommendation to include the coastal zone soil survey ESDs within the sections in development, but also provide guidance on to develop ESD for existing and planned coastal zone mapping project. As this new data is being populated into NRCS and published to WSS, it would be good for corresponding ESDs to be populated as well. And then also include a better framework and policy and guidance as to how these coastal zones, soil survey ESDs or concepts are applied. And then I think we had a comment at one point to include reclaimed minelands as specific other land category and use in ES concepts and DSP guidance on how to best provide restoration information. I think that's a lot, and I know there's some work being done, and this is just, I think it all boils down to better guidance and descriptions on how and what to do with these ES concepts and ESDs, I think. Charles, do you have anything to add to that particular section?
I know we sent I sent out the current drafts, and the two sections on the two land uses that were currently being drafted were on cropland and pastureland, if I remember right. So sounds like an additional part to the recommendation with the alternative states are the urban lands and coastal zone and mine lands, reclaimed mine lands would all be sections that would be of interest to include in the in part 632. I think I'm trying to remember who is on that in that group that's reviewing those.
I'm on that group, Charles, and you are correct. The section 632 is its intended use is to define alternative land uses and how they fit into a state transition model in the ESD. So all land uses need to be accounted for and described. And I think, well, let me look here real quick. The subparts that are drafted are cropland, pasture land, and rangeland for some reason.
All right, so to hear right then that the recommendation as it stands is appropriate and will add to what is currently being done.
Yeah, add all other land uses, if that's the term we're running with.
Okay. Okay, that I don't hear any more discussion. I don't see anything in the chat coming up either. So it seems like we're all on the same page that these are the 3 recommendations and proposals that we for sure want to push forward. We have now, I guess, before we move on, we have one thing that we need to address, and that is the committee chairs and co-chairs for the next conference in 2 years from now. And we're looking for volunteers. I'm pretty sure Charles is not going to do it again, and I know for sure I'm not going to do this again. So we need somebody else to step up to take this over. We do have a nice list here. You have very good record of what we talked about. Belinda, you're raising your hand.
Yes, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate that. In my recollection of past experience, this is actually not within the purview of this committee. I believe it's supposed to be, we could make a recommendation, and certainly someone could express interest or volunteer, and that recommendation would then be forwarded to the state soil scientist in the location where the conference will next be delivered, which I can't off the top of my head remember. But I believe that's the way that it's supposed to be done. So we're not actually charged with coming up with, you know, that person, but we can make a recommendation.
I feel like this gets discussed at the business meeting of the steering committee and the committee chairs and co-chairs, I believe. And the next South meeting will be in Louisiana. So I think Mitch, I don't know if he's still on, but he's going to have the pleasure of hosting this in 2 years.
In some of the communications on the, it was noted that this would be they were looking for recommendations from this committee of who to chair or who'd be the co-chairs for the next meeting.
So then I guess the business, the business meeting then is voted on, I suppose, and it's kind of passed the torch from what I understand.
Correct. That the way I remember it, I was voluntold during the business meeting virtually in Arkansas 2 years ago.
Right, and I do have it in our report template too, that we come up with this within our group with some recommendations already.
You know, having you on, Patrick, has really brought the attention of the forestry side, right? So is there someone to keep this going? Is there someone that you recommend in Louisiana to bring on that's not in this discussion already?
I don't know of anyone right now. And I'm not too sure where that forestry side, where my forestry part came into this group, whether this was really helpful or not. I think it was naturally forestry sites came up as a discussion. I'm not necessarily the cause of this.
Well, the goal is to have different disciplines and perspectives, bring in other people to discuss topics that, you know, maybe we have a blind spot for, or maybe you know, we're missing, not because we don't want to, but because, you know, having other professionals come in to help say like, hey, this is important, maybe we should do this. I mean, I think that would be fair to say. So it was when Dara recommended you, there was a reason that she recommended you. It wasn't an accident. Ecosystems, forests are very much part of the ecosystems. So
well, as it relates to soils, pretty much anybody that has a forest operations focus deals with soils in some form or fashion in terms of best management practices and protecting soils, protecting erosion. So I'm between two names. So one name right now that I think works in Louisiana in my field that could be a recommendation. I have to look up who it actually is that works over there. There's a few people out there that do this, and pretty much any ecologist, forest ecologist would work pretty well too, that understands soils enough, but also has that whole forestry background that goes in, and can probably come up with some names from somebody in Louisiana.
And these meetings are cooperative, so it's not just for
Right.
soil scientists. So
Right.
It's always good to get different perspectives and different.
But it certainly helps if you have some background. I'm still catching up on all this stuff, and it was like so far outside of my wheelhouse. I think the only thing I really knew about all of this was WSS, the Web Soil Survey, because I use that sometimes. But other than that, everything is kind of new, and you're really absorbing a lot of information. But we can find somebody at another university over in Louisiana, and if anybody has connections already or knows of somebody that would be a good fit, we're happy to hear some names too. And I see you, Matt.
I don't think that the co-chairs have to be from the state where the conference is held though, right? I mean, that's not a requirement.
No.
So we could think outside the box, like across the region.
Well, in that case, I do have a few names that come to mind that work a lot with soils already in the forestry world that bring in a completely different aspect of, what they look at. Not sure they agree, but we can certainly twist some arms. Got awfully quiet here now. So where do we stand? Do we have anybody from within NRCS that we have a name that we could recommend? Or do we just want to leave this and have the business meeting sort this all out?
I think having recommendations would be good.
I mean, I can give you some names here, like right on the forest operations side, there's a couple researchers in Georgia, one for sure that deals, more with boots on the ground kind of stuff, Chad Bolding. He does a lot of water quality, a lot of soil impact stuff that could be a really good co-chair.
Okay. I mean, Charles, we can add these names into this report that's submitted, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Yeah, then we can find a few more names that we can reach out to then by the time we have that final report written here and completed. Anybody from this group in here that wants to step up on the chair part?
Hey, Patrick, this is
Yep.
Jack Ferrara again.
Yes.
I could step up in 2 years.
I appreciate that very much.
Yep.
All right. Then we have that part settled. That will be great. Okay. We have that. I have now 2 options for you all. Okay, and I got Matt sending us some more recommendations. That's great. All right. 2 options. One, we discussed already our proposals. We're done with that. We can conclude this meeting if we wanted to. Or 2, we can look at our big list up here and see if any of the, ranks number 4, 5, 6 or so catch anybody's eye or something. Maybe we should do something about this and recommend this and move it forward. We still have a little bit of time left in our allotted time frame. So if anybody thinks that maybe the FIA workshops, GIS workshops, and something like that, this is something that maybe it should be pushed forward, we can discuss it and add it. we had something about the role of the English edit in ESD publications. Is this something that needs to be pushed forward? Is it already being done? Is it outside of our scope? Right. There's a few more points here that we could discuss. If anybody feels like that those 3 proposals we have is not enough and there's something else that really needs to be pushed and addressed.
Does it only have to be the 4, 5, and 6?
No, it doesn't have to. Doesn't have to be like any of those on this list. Those were the topics that were discussed. Those were the topics that Charles found by combing through previous years' conferences and seeing what was discussed, what was addressed, what was not addressed, and then summarizing all that. And then we basically rehashed everything and now put it down in writing so that the next chair has it a little bit easier and has everything in one spot.
Yeah, I feel like number 10 is always something that needs to be something that could be, worked on, but it's always a work in progress. So,
Exactly. And I think that's what we came down with too, that it
So I
is a
don't
work
know.
in progress. It's happening. What can we recommend that needs to be done? What specific action items can we really push?
yeah,
Yeah, we struggled with that.
I mean, that would have to be like, reports submitted between the two, like states and SPSD, states submit reports on what is lacking, what they need. I don't know if they already do that. There'd have to be something tangible that can be read and things checked off, spreadsheets and whatever. And then whether it's regional needs, state needs can get consolidated into regional needs and see if SPSD and states are working together, especially with like TSS, things like that.
And you're right on, Christine. That's a lot of that is already included with our tech team and management team and board of director meetings, that we look at that communication. But is there something, and it's always something that we want to make sure that we try and do as good a job as we can to communicate back and forth. Is there something that we're
missing? A black hole. Where everything goes. So,
but I know for myself, early on in my career, the SRC finally, I sent him a few emails, and finally sent me back, or he called me and he said, okay, you need to summarize this and bullet it. It needs to be no more than about 4 lines of bullets if you want me to read any of it. And so, that was a specific recommendation from that SRC when I was communicating on ESDs. So that became my style, that I would send stuff through the states that way. So it's an ongoing thing. So just thinking outside the box, that there's something that we want to push up.
I feel like there needs to be some type of tangible report, but it's hard to say what should be included on there, and needs will be different by state. So, I mean, I think it's important, especially once we get past the soils 2026 initiative, and ESD is becoming on everybody's radar more and more outside of the SPSD. Can there only be 3 that you propose?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. We just picked the 3 that had the highest ranks, and after that, I think our internal ranking started dropping off to like, yeah, it has some importance, but not really. Nobody was really super excited about this, and thought that it's like that's something that needs to be done for sure. It's just something that maybe it's been addressed already. It's happening to some extent, but we didn't really have a hard recommendation to do anything with.
Yeah, and the communication, I don't know, it seems like it's not haphazard, would not be the word, but there's consistency. It's just not, it doesn't seem to be there, and each state has it, does it differently, and each state may have different needs, but overall, I think especially with these conferences, having that link and finding that link and strengthening it is going to be really important, I think.
All right, so I'm happy to add something to that.
But I don't want to be the only one that thinks that. Like, that's just, I mean,
Well,
and there's a bunch of proposals on there, so.
Right.
Well,
These were all discussion items, like, not necessarily proposal. It's just, this came up, this was done in the past, and it seems like it dropped off in the past, and we rehashed it, and it still didn't make it very far in our list. But at least it's an inclusive list of what happened in the past and what we figured can happen, but I think everything else that we had before needs to happen first. But I'm very happy if the rest of the group thinks that, that improved communication, if we can put a recommendation together, we can certainly add that. It's just the need for improved communication in my mind doesn't mean much. That is just, yeah, sure, there's a need. Of course, there's always a need. But what can we do specifically that needs to be addressed regionally or nationally?
Right.
And that's always the tricky part. And so far, I don't think we've really seen something, and then the whole team ranked it fairly low, right? Coming in the part with low priority. So, but we can change it.
Anybody?
So
Matt.
you're trying to decide if you want to add more than 3 items. Is that what you're trying to figure out right now?
That's correct.
Right. But I mean, if I'm the only one that thinks the communication part of it, which was number 10, I don't know how to word it to have an actual actionable item that can be concrete and measurable. And if nobody else thinks it's important, I'm not going to push for it. I'm not going to be the only one.
Do you mean communication between
the states and Soil and Plant Science Division? I think when it comes to these meetings, I think it'd be very valuable. But how to do that, and who would the state soil scientists, I guess, would be the ones doing the reports, doing the communication. Like we're kind of the liaison now, but.
So you're wanting more communication between individual states and the Soil Plant Science Division. So like state to national level.
Yeah, communicating needs, communicating what we need from them, what they need from us, integrating some of these projects, these soils into, whether it's conservation planning or, figuring out, we have all these ESDs, how do the states want to use it? How they're going to use it, things like that. So we can have a better idea of all this information we're collecting, make sure it is going to get used, and it is going to get used correctly, or if states need help and how to implement it. Or being told how they can, if they're confused on how they can use it, things like that. But I don't know what kind of action item we could draw up, to make that possible. We don't have to do it now, right? It's just a proposal, right?
So there's not a chain of communication currently that is working. Maybe the current structure is not working well, is what
yes
I'm hearing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's some states, I think there's better communication, and and part of it's like some states have better staffing than others, and some positions are vacant, some for a while, things like that. So things don't get passed down consistently or timely or, for whatever reason.
So that wouldn't be specific to this committee topic, right? You're saying that's sort of across the board?
Yeah, I mean, but this, we would just be addressing at least just for our region, and maybe, it could be a model for other regions, or it gets pushed up to discuss at the national, like how do we improve upon it? But I don't know. Communication is always can be improved, right?
Okay. Maybe it's worth mentioning as an aside to the committee reporting out that it was also, another point discussed was the need to improve the communication between individual states and Soil Plant Science Division for states within the southern region. And that could be discussed at the business meeting from members of other committees as well. If that would have more momentum, and that way it wouldn't get lost if that's a concern. But that would probably have to need some other NRCS folks in the region to determine if that's also the case.
Well, Matt, thank you very much for your suggestion there. So I wanted to basically say pretty much the same thing, to put this forward, not necessarily as a proposal recommendation, but as a discussion point. And I think Charles and I were going to include this in our document that we're going to move forward to the business meeting and have that in there. So that way it doesn't get lost. It doesn't necessarily have an action item with it, but it has something that we need to definitely keep up there. And then communication is important. That's what I tell my students all day long. And that we just need to work on this. And maybe it's not something that just this committee needs to work on, but it's something that's on a much higher level that requires more input than what we can come up with here. And maybe that includes a new technical team or committee or whatever it may be that works on that. But we're going to write this in, we'll include this, unless somebody is completely against this, if so, speak now.
The recommendation that has been floated in the National Ecosystem Committee meeting was the inclusion of ESDs in state staff business plans or performance plans, and that may be tie into this communication. If there was there's more skin in the game, basically, from some state staff, that may encourage that communication back and forth. And it was just mentioned to me in a chat, on a side chat, so I think I'm bringing it up as another avenue for this discussion. What you think, Christine? We're gonna add it to your performance plan?
And the communication part of it?
Just ESDs in general. We're gonna say you got to take care of so much on the ESDs.
I don't know, that might be in mine. I don't know.
Okay, cool.
I'm not sure. I mean, I have been sitting in on these technical team meetings for the ESDs for MLRAs 153A and B. But the last few weeks, the conference has taken up a lot of my headspace and time. So I haven't been able to sit in, but I try to.
And we appreciate that. That's an important thing. Is it's hard to dictate how we're going to communicate, I guess. Just the fact that there is some communication is always a plus. So I don't know if, yeah. I don't know if there's another,
I feel like state soil scientists need, I assume that they were involved just because, you know, it involves, you know, the soils data within their state.
mhm.
That was my understanding. I want to say it's in my performance plan, at least just to help out and do the, you know, tech teams and just be aware, you know, not that you're writing the thing, but you're providing, you know, some guidance.
Oh, Miss Jane. I think some of the issues in the past that people in your type position brought up is that we hadn't got the support for the ecological science side of it. You know, they're so busy doing programs that we don't have a lot of input that's really needed from them. But I may be wrong in some states.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, James.
You know, spending that money is number one on the state side, and everything else is kind of secondary to a point.
So maybe one of the points to help with the communication would be to make it more clear how the data being collected by the states and the projects the states are working on, how that feeds into national programs and needs, and then how that stuff's all going to be used. Would that be helpful for communicating, you know, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and then other people become more motivated?
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, even aside from the data collection, there's a whole section of the ecological site description that is under the purview of the SRC and their staff that has not been communicated to them in the past. At least not effectively.
And Charles has done that in Mississippi, you know, to have PowerPoints and bring them involved, but it's kind of a slow process in getting them engaged because of other priorities.
All right, I added a fourth point to our proposal section here for the increased communication. It sounds like it's more than just like a little nudge, you should do something. So taking some of the comments that I've received from y'all here. So increased communication between states and SPSDs, the recommendation to have regional, national NRCS, or is it NCSS, develop plans to increase communication, involve multiple stakeholders in technical teams, meetings, etc. Additional reporting mechanisms with that why, what, how NCSS work is done, engage federal partners and university in technical teams. Is that all right? Does that sit well with everyone? Should we add something kind of to put that as our fourth recommendation forward? It's maybe a little bit stronger than just suggesting we should do something. It has couple additional things here, especially this additional reporting mechanism of the or communication, why, what, how we do things.
Patrick, maybe maybe put this in like a Google Doc and send it to everybody to try to wordsmith it, and just put a deadline of Friday morning. It'll be a quick turnaround, but at least everybody will have a chance to look at it. So it's not all on you to write this up. And Charles, does that sound good, everyone?
Yeah, I think we can do that. I'm gonna work with Charles and make sure we put this on something that then gets sent out to everybody. But it's a start. We have a start here. We can wordsmith it left and right, but I think the gist of what we want to do and what we want to recommend is there. So that's all right. If there's no other discussion or no other comments, I'm gonna stop sharing here. Then I'm done here. And I think our committee is pretty much done. So I'm gonna put it back to Dara to see if there's anything else we need to be doing. And if not, we'll call it a day.
You did a great job, Patrick. We're all clapping. You just can't hear us. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you,
You
Charles.
did a great job, Patrick. I agree.
No worries.
Question there, attendee list. I know in Teams, I usually generate an attendance list. Can we do that in Zoom?
Well, we have it on the screen. And Matt, if you already wrote them down, if you could send them to Patrick or even just throw it in the chat box, we could do that. If not, I'll go ahead and write them down real quickly and send to Patrick and you.
I didn't write them down. I was also wondering before we broke away if there's a way to capture the names.
That's okay. I just took a screenshot of the participants. I'm all good.
Okay. And I can always look back too at the video. Well, thanks everybody. I think we'll probably see a lot of you in a little bit too at 3 o'clock or 3:30. And if anybody has any questions just regarding the other committee meetings or anything else, posters, they should be up hopefully within the next couple days. I'm waiting on a couple more. Thank you for attending and hope to one day see you all in person.